I'm Rebecca Tourino Collinsworth with a totally biased review for Parley Lit. And today I have the pleasure of talking with Gavin Reub. Gavin co-adapted and directed a production of The Lower Depths by Maxim Gorky in February of 2024. The production was co-produced by the Seagull Project and Intiman Theater. Gavin is a Seattle-based director, producer, and dramaturg, and is the artistic director of the Seagull Project. Gavin, thanks so much for taking the time to chat today.
Hello.
In your program notes, you wrote that this production was 4 years in the making. So for people that might not be familiar with live theater producing, not to mention translating, adapting, casting, rehearsing, what hurdles did you encounter along the way?
We had, honestly, a lot of kind of roadblocks and speed bumps along the way. We had big plans after our production of Uncle Vanya in 2019 to start working on The Lower Depths. We thought it was going to be a production that had a lot of themes that were pertinent to Seattle at the time. We knew we wanted to work with all these partner organizations in order to really activate it. But then, of course, almost immediately after that, as we were just getting it going, we were talking about casting and we were talking about partners, the pandemic hit. So that's the first big roadblock. And then about 3 years ago, we met for our first workshop. We started with a cast then. We started with a translation. So we have a resident ensemble member. His name is Tyler Polumsky, who speaks Russian fluently, studied at and acted at the Ilkhom Theater in Uzbekistan for more than a decade. And so I had read a bunch of translations about this play, and they all were a little confusing, to be totally frank. So we went to Tyler and asked him to do a one-to-one, non-poetic translation. Just can you just tell me as close as we possibly can what is on the page? And even that was complicated because there are these philosophical hurdles. He actually invented a new word in the writing of this text that I can dive into more if you'd like.
Yes.
Well, basically in the fourth act, which is this kind of soapbox. So act 4 is the very end. It was definitely his place where he was speaking his piece. In fact, Anton Chekhov, after he saw it, spoke and was kind of do we really need the fourth act? But nonetheless, it became a very important piece of text because he distinguishes between two types of human animal. There's people, and it basically was folks who live for themselves, folks who take care of themselves. They don't really think about the future. They think about the now. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially in our context of it, I don't think, because it's some people need to just think of themselves and for themselves.
Right.
So some people just need to be people. And a lot of people in that play, I think, have to be people because to think of anything else is impossible. And the second version, and the word he created is the word human, which is to mean in the Russian something much larger. It's like humanity.
Okay.
Maybe is a better way to think of it, right? It is about all of us coming together for the possibility that if we all work for a better future, eventually there will be a person who was born that will transcend us. Now, of course, he wrote it just prior to 1902 under a monarchy in Russia. And it's someone who would be a big part of, I'll just say, the Soviet state for the good and the bad.
Yes.
And so, of course, it was initially a huge deal. People did not like it, but it became heralded by the communists as they took over, and it's still studied in schools to this day. So he creates this concept that it's not we're what we're going to use people and humans and pretend like our American audience is going to understand them as different. So right there was an issue off the bat is how do we translate Russian philosophy that is out of time and place, not to mention culture, in a way that Americans are going to be able to take something away from. So right away, that was our first kind of hurdle was what do we do with that? That was back when we had a different adapter even.
Oh my.
Yeah, we had a different adapter initially, and then that adapter left. And then we decided to take it all internal. So David Quicksall, Charles Leggett, and myself ended up taking up the piece and kind of working through it, which was great because, working with folks who are that involved already, everybody is so in. But we recast the play probably 7 times. It was a bumpy 3 years, but we unearthed a lot in that work. I think it was in the last email I sent everybody as we were closing, but I think I don't think that a play like this really can be easy to put up. And if it is easy, I'm not sure you're doing it right. And that's not to do the whole like, oh, like we're artists and we have to put ourselves through it. It's really more about like, this is not an easy play. And in order for it to change people, and I mean people who are working on it and people who witness it, I think that there has to feel like there's something meatier inside of it.
Did you find it at all challenging to further Gorky play through the Seagull Project? I'm just wondering if obviously a hugely important play, but not as produced. Did you have to get some buy-in? Did you have to work for that?
Yes and no. It's a play that I knew, but of course, like I've been steeped in Russian theater since I graduated from college. Although ironically, I wasn't a huge enjoyer of Russian literature while I was in college, but that's a whole other thing. It takes a special hand, I think, to get you in there in the right way. Yeah, we had only done Chekhov till this point. We knew we wanted to do something that wasn't Chekhov. We wanted to do something that felt like it was a slight departure to open things up in a different way. I think a lot of people were like, this is it's an intense play. And I think a lot of people felt that it was really inaccessible. In fact, I know they did. And I'm fortunate to have a relationship with this ensemble where we can be transparent about stuff like that. But it wasn't until our first updated draft, which we got about a year ago, a little more than a year ago, that kind of started to contemporize things. People were like, oh, I get it now. Most people don't know Gorky. It's not something that's really like even taught in schools that much anymore. This is probably his most famous play, but even this one, it's more like a footnote in most places. Even a lot of theater artists don't know it. You're right. It's a messy play, and I think that's part of the structure. It's intentional, I believe. He's breaking from this melodrama that is kind of part of the structure of it, that you could say that some of the characters still exist in those archetypes, but they don't want to be those archetypes by any means.
Okay, so you mentioned that maybe the cast found the material occasionally dense, and obviously the plot is maybe not the most prominent element of the script. Can you talk through your process with the actors? The Seagull Project was founded with this idea of long-form actor-driven process. What did that look like? Or maybe what did that feel like to be in that process with them?
We are actor driven, and I've been involved in all of our processes in one way or another, and especially in the workshop development of everything. In the past, we've really kind of allowed things to be a little organic. Starting with table reads, a lot of the times we would do what are called slow reads. It's like literally take the word I was walking.
Yes.
It would take us a month of meeting once every week to read the play, but it's great because you're connecting, you're deconstructing everything. It's a great way to pull away preconceived notions about a text and allow new things to bubble up to the top and connections. But this time it had to be a little different. And initially I honestly tried to lead with some of our old format a little bit in the workshop process, reading it, talking about it, training, kind of like seeing how we could build that and start having conversations. But it was different. And I think the biggest thing is because this is actually kind of a mixture of three different processes. There's our normal process, which is like deep dive actor characterization. Now, that had to be a little different, however, because we didn't actually really have the characters yet, or at least the text in the way that allows us full access to them. That's when we kind of realized, okay, we're actually doing two other things. The first one is a new work process. This is a new work workshop. That's where we need to start. We need to have some text, and we need to make sure that we are treating it like we are changing, and we are taking feedback from the actors, and we are moving this, and we are adjusting this, and we're looking at rhythm and switching out poems that are in there and figuring out how, in conversation with the ensemble, we can adjust that. And we did. A lot is different than the original. For example, with Anna, who's the mother, who's played by Sharva Maynard, she has a beautiful, really kind of intimate scene with Luca, played by Amy Thone, where they're talking about death. And it's just the two of them down in the corner by the bed. And Sharva, in trying to flesh out this character in a great way, pulling stuff from her own life, wrote this big thing that was about her memories with her father and going down to Cohen Lake and this time when she like fell and hurt herself and he took out medicine and he like drew a chicken on her leg and all this stuff. And we took it all and we're like, this is beautiful. And we put it in there only later to cut it all and turn it into a more physical element, which was just her drawing in the air. So we were always interacting with the actors and trying to find things and then taking that and then adjusting it in the text and then spitting it back out and trying that, like you do with a new work process. And then the third aspect, and this is always tied in with a new work process, especially with an ensemble, is devising. The stuff that Sharva did is kind of a form of devising. We also did some more improvised exercises, having people build scenes out, which is basic structure. We train every workshop, and we've kind of developed our own form of training. We call it a triumvirate, and it's a three different warm-ups that we do every day, and they're a mixture of Suzuki and slow tempo and kind of Declan Donnellan target work.
Yeah.
And so those are also things that we're always using to help to kind of develop and devise things. The last thing I'll say is we do something called etudes, which that word can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people because it's just sketch in French. Our version is basically, they are sketches. They're character sketches. It could be on the very simple version, I want to work out this offstage thing that we don't ever get to see, but I feel like it's important. So I'm going to ask so-and-so to come up and we're just going to try to play through this. I have like some basic things I want to do. Let me talk to them. We're going to try it. Awesome. It helps them flesh something out. What I like to do more so with it is to build in things that allow it to be more abstract. So you might combine that first meeting with somebody with the feeling of attraction you have with them right away. And you might play with like this push and pull or with like this actual like sweating like thing, like physical action that you're playing with. And then just that physical action might be the only thing we take from it. And then they might just repeat it a few times and it just becomes something that is a character like tick, but I like to think of it more like a motif that we can return to that makes something a little more abstract, but also like thicker and fuller because it has this other thing underneath it. And I think you can feel that.
That reminds me a little bit sort of in a category with maybe psychological gesture, the Michael Chekhov technique with like a lot of long form physical improvisation and stuff like that. So you found, I'm sure, that once they had done these etudes, once they had spent that time, once they had, in fact, written and personalized monologues and scenes, essentially, that a lot of that text could be taken away and replaced with the text of the play that they were playing. What's left is this kind of distillation or this kind of it's like bouillon or something. It's just like very, 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 very rich.
I love doing that. And there was something that I would say a lot. I was like, we're looking for more spots where we can pull some of that text away because our audience is smart nowadays. They understand small gesture and what a glance can mean because we're trained to watch film. Gorky, that once again, like that day and age, they were trained to watch melodrama, which you really had to feed that to the audience, And I love the idea. It's like, how much can we actually melt down and get rid of the text and allow it to be something that is just, like you said, thick and that the audience is like, I don't know exactly what that was, but it impacted me and I'm interested in it. And I think I have an idea. Mm-hmm. And to me, as an audience member, that stuff's always really interesting to me, as long as we don't lose the spine of the piece.
You can depart.
Yeah.
As long as you come back.
Yeah. We're not a dance company by any means, but we are very interested in craft.
Right.
And physical craft. Okay,
so were there particular moments that were especially challenging in this production for you?
Oh yeah. The first two acts of this play, we really wanted to lean into the kind of realism of it. The original doesn't have all of the overlapping dialogue. That's something that we really built in there. And I was really excited by it, by wanting to see how we can balance this space and these multiple things that are happening at the same time, how that can be something that is both important to listen to these things, but also some of it can go away and you don't necessarily lose anything. But it was challenging, especially the top of Act 1 and the top of Act 2. So the poker scene that starts Act 2 and then the overlapping dialogue at the very top of the play. Those were two challenging spots purely because it's an orchestration. We just had to do them a lot. and at the same time, it's not something that you can solve technically either. You have to listen. In order to get to a place where you can listen that well, you have to technically achieve some level of success so that then you can start playing the scene and be listening to your scene partners and be reacting when there's 3 or 4 conversations happening at the same time, so you can track and pull those strings out. I know it was a challenge for the actors as well. It was really successful in the end, but definitely challenging. The next thing is the third act in general. So the third act in the Gorky, it takes place in an alleyway. I had this kind of vision for the play where by the time I get to the fourth act, that acts 1 and 2 really sit in this realism, in this world that is like we are watching a play. It really feels like kind of tucked away a little bit. And then the third act starts to break that. I wanted it to feel like there were puddles of poetry on the floor, so that it was like it was there, it was present, but we weren't using all of that language. It's a really tough act in general. We cut a lot from it. We were cutting stuff from that up until our final preview. We ended up landing in a place that design-wise was probably a little even further to the poetic than I had ever thought we would get. How you work with an act that is very talky and in our version very close to the audience with
I was in the front center.
Yeah.
I loved it. They were in my lap. Mm-hmm. It felt different from the rest of the play as a whole.
Yeah, and I really wanted it to. It's the only part that takes place outside, and it's the first day we're in Moscow. I mean, in Nizhny Novgorod in Russia. It doesn't matter. In Russia, it's the first day where the winter kind of breaks. And people can go outside. And so it's like they've spent this horrible winter in horrible conditions. And to go outside and breathe fresh air and feel the sun on your face, I was like, that has to be a good thing. And we have to know it's a good thing, even if the act is going towards something that's going to be horrible and is going to break everyone's lives. But how do we make it so it's that, but also that we're kind of playing with this idea of this veil of the basement world and then this outside world, and that the sky, this drop that we're playing with, is not meant to be literal necessarily. It has metaphorical capacity, and so we're like, okay, how do we break that in a way we're quick enough that the audience can be like, oh, okay, they're not really pretending this is a sky.
It's not actually the sky, right?
But it exists in a place that's helping us go to a different place.
It was sort of challenging because the curtain was down, and the curtain, for people that didn't see it, the curtain was pretty far down stage. So the playing space, there was very little depth to play with. So suddenly it was long and quite thin. And to do the entire act that way, and then also some physical violence.
Yeah, it's 7 feet of depth or something. And I was really clear that we had to sculpt that scene out more. Like in the developing of the first 2 acts, we have an incredible ensemble of actors, and you get to kind of trust them to start to build out some of the patterns and things. And then you'd be like, okay, this is working, this is not. Let's get clear about this, blah, blah, blah. But that act, we have to be crystal clear about every single movement here, and we have to sculpt it. And we removed a lot of the tendencies of blocking and realism, like giving backs to the audience, because it was like, no, we kind of have to see everything. When you only have that thin and long of a space, and it's only usually one person talking at a time, you got to make sure that your sight lines are playing right, and that you're really specific with the language of your blocking.
I have a question about another moment of the play, which I think is, for me, one of the most challenging just plot elements, is the very end.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering how you felt. I just want to hear how you felt about it and how you approached it.
So that whole fourth act, I wanted it to feel like there was a large weight on everybody, and we train in slow tempo, and so which for folks who don't know, slow tempo is like a Japanese form of training that involves, to kind of cut it up really thin, is to move very slowly in order to make sure you're very, very specific with your physicality. And so we wanted to play with some of that. And then I wanted to see what happened if Satine, through his speeches, was able to kind of wake the world up a little bit and was able to kind of make it so that he could bring some possibility back into the world, some hope, right? Because this is a place that's kind of been abandoned. Nobody really knows where to go or what to do next. People feel like they're in the rope. The hope that was presented by Luca, by Amy's character, has been thrown out the friggin' window. People are in jail and have been physically assaulted because of it. And this idea of that version of hope is gone. But a portion of her still echoes in him. And so he starts to wake up and he starts to think that maybe he can make community. Maybe he can do something. And he's being successful. And then this other group of gentlemen come in, right? And they're bringing in food and they're bringing in drinks and they're bringing in music and we're building the lighting up. And you can feel this momentum that's going on. And one thing that I was clear about, big spoiler for folks who haven't seen it, is that the ending, it wanted to feel, I was like, how can we get it like as close to feeling like, oh my God, we're all going to make it. This is amazing. I want to sing with these people. I want to go party with them. I love these people on stage right now, like, and then you can totally break it. Because of course, at the height of that, what we turned into a musical moment, which is not the way it is necessarily in the Gorky, we have the Baron and Dawn come in and they say that the actor has hung herself on the lamppost outside. I wanted it to feel like especially in the music and everything, that the audience was kind of starting to become a little bit a part of it. I wanted it to feel like when you say lamppost, you think maybe that's the lamppost that's outside the theater. We had them enter through the house to do that. I wanted it to feel like this kind of possibility was there, and it was the audience was kind of there with it a little bit, and then everything has to revert back to lack of possibility. Because the reality is that the folks living in these conditions work in these cycles of trauma, that really this play, it's not a play that can let you off that easy, because it would be an injustice to the reality of this world. It's a play that you want to have be like, okay, yes, everything ended okay. They sing and they dance, and then they have a big hug at the end, and you think they're going to start a society together, but it has to be, no, it goes back to where it started in a sense, if not worse. And I think the most powerful part of it is that you have no moment of catharsis at the end. It yanks it away from you just before you get that. And I think that's actually an exceptional tool because it means that the audience, the play doesn't get to leave them.
Right.
And maybe that's a selfish thing, but I think it's a powerful thing when you're talking about something that is dealing with so many symptoms of trauma and marginalization and poverty that exist today and that you would see as soon as you left the doors of that theater. And I think that, if we really want theater to be a vessel for change, then we, have to make sure that the event is something that extends beyond the 7:30 to 10 o'clock window of time frame where it exists physically.
The thing that stands out to me most about most of Chekhov's plays, there's always a character or characters that are, suffering but are enduring. And they are always talking about where it's really hard for us, but we can go on. It's a kind of a similar refrain, and that is a forward drive towards something that helps, I think. It helps the play feel like it could uplift. And this play by Gorky does not do that. And it's not just the suicide at the end. It does. I thought the music that they used, the very, very popular I Want to Be Sedated,
Ramones, yeah. So
kind of perfect for that exuberant kind of everything sucks, but everything's great though, because we're all singing together. There was that forward. So I think you were successful in doing that ramp up, like, oh my God, everything for the first time, everybody actually seems okay. Everybody seems happy. Nope, right?
Yeah.
But challenging maybe to find that balance with the ensemble, with the text, with the staging of it.
Oh yeah, we had to work the rhythm of the entire act has to work to get you there, right? And we had to work to build the drive-in a way especially with like 3 giant monologues by Satine, which Miguel does a great job with.
Yeah.
We also tried different songs. And I was concerned about I Want to Be Sedated initially. I had built a big playlist, which had I Want to Be Sedated, it had like Living on a Prayer. And I was like, I know it can't be too popular, but it has to be popular enough where people know it. But, with I Want to Be Sedated, I was like, is it too on the nose? Because, it's like, I want to be sedated. And it's about these folks and they're drinking on stage and It's like sending the wrong message. And then I was like, you know what? They do want to be sedated. And what they want to do in that moment, and this is what I kept saying, is they want to transcend. They want to go beyond that space. They want to float above it. And sometimes transcendence for folks who are unable to achieve it through fiscal means relying on things like actual sedation.
Yes.
To bypass the realities of your world, which is why a lot of the unhoused folks around Seattle, have to rely on substance abuse. If you sleep on concrete every night, it's easier to sleep when you have a lot of booze in your system than when you're sober. And that's just true.
I mean, people with means do that.
Oh, yeah. We don't talk about that nearly enough, that it's like, we're always like, oh, all these addicts on the street. It's like, what about all the addicts at home who rely on that every single night? Like I take sleeping pills sometimes, it's not quite the same, but yeah, I totally agree with that.
A cool thing about the Seagull Project is that, you've only got a certain amount of plays to choose from and stage if you're working with Chekhov. And so you're sort of always working on a small library of plays. If you were to remount this, is there something that you would want to try?
Yeah, I would probably try a few things. One thing I'd really like to try is to play the entire thing on a smaller footprint. I work for an organization called Path with Art and I do podcasting for them. And it's a lot of folks who have been unhoused and have lived in shelters. And so I'm recording their stories. I get a lot of stories about why people don't want to live in shelters. A lot of it is, it's noisy all the time. There's no room. Everybody's sick. All of these things. That lack of space is interesting. That you have to step over people. That you have to move through things in that way. I'd be really interested to see what that would do to the play. How small that could be, and you could still maintain that, would be really interesting. And at one point, it starts to get just like a tiny noise box, and it's like way too much. But that's one thing I'd love to try.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
I think there's a bunch of different ways to do that third act. So I'm always thinking about that, what the approach is. I had talked about like filming it and then projecting it on the alley wall and then having the actors do it in front of it. Because I was obsessed with this. The third act is a lot about truth and lies, right? Which is also what the drop that we use kind of represents in a way. It's like this fake thing, right? And the lies that we tell ourselves to get through the day and the truth and the reality of the world. So I was like, oh, maybe we do something where we're like filming these almost portrait things where it's like in a park and they're like dressed well and like it's like a freaking Vanity Fair shoot and they sit there and we're kind of just repeating these live portraits of folks, and then we're playing it in front of them. I think that's too much, but there's things like that where I'm like, how far do you push that? I'm always really interested in. And then the last thing I'll say is it's a big show, and we were teching until the very end, and we finished teching, and our lighting designer Ryan Dunn was still putting cues in. I would love to spend some more time to get with the fourth act from a design perspective, to just get it really, really crisp and clean, to play with when we're really bringing these colors in and how we pull them up and down, and more like is it more like a beating heart. So there's a lot of stuff like that too. But I could say a billion things. And then with a play like this, it's always like, how much can we cut? How much do we need? What's the right cutting of this play? Is
there anything else that you want to say? Do you want to say anything about any of your partners, like any of the organizations you want to rep for?
This was, in a lot of ways, the hardest thing we've ever done, and something that I feel like everybody walked away feeling was really, really valuable. Of course, Intiman Theater has been an incredible partner along the way with this for us. We're a small company. It's basically like Julie Briskman and myself are like the only two staff members on this company, and then it's a lot of like volunteers and stuff. And so having a partner that is there to watch your back and take care of things was invaluable. The second one is this play would not have been what it was without our partner organizations. And whether it's University Heights and Vehicle Resident Outreach, who we got to workshop with, or Gethsemane that we got to workshop with, or places like Mary's Place we were always in conversation with, or Recovery Cafe, who we would just go and hang out there and engage with the patrons. These are the things that make this type of play richer and fuller, because much like how we got to spend time being like, what's inside of Dutch's bunk, we also get to spend time interacting with and engaging with and supporting real people who live these lives. I'm thankful for the way that our community and our partner organizations helped us grow this into something that went beyond the stage itself. And I hope that's something that we get to keep on playing with, even if it's Chekhov or whatever we happen to do next. It feels really vital to me.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate the chance to have my own little postmortem.
Yes, indeed.